And thank you all for your patience. We're going to begin in less than 1 minute here. We're admitting folks from the waiting room. We want to be sure that everyone who wants to attend can hear us from the beginning. We'll begin in just about 30 seconds. Thank you. Okay. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I know how busy you all are right now as you're preparing for the new upcoming school year. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to join us and be informed. And we do appreciate your dedication and your leadership as we roll out the graduation initiative across the state. My name is Brian Campbell. I'm the director of the Bureau of Curriculum, Assessment, and Instruction for PDE. As I'm sure you know by logging on today, the graduating class of 2023, which would be your current seniors, this year's upcoming seniors, are the first class that are graduating under the Act 158 state graduation requirement. In some previous trainings, we covered a lot of the general requirements overall on past trainings. And all of those trainings are available on the SAS website in our graduation toolkit. And we are going to show you how to access that during this webinar. So you will have access to this and to past webinars. I say that to let you know that our focus today is really to review with you the impact that Act 136 of 2020, which was the COVID Relief Act, and Act 55 of 2022, which was this year's School Code Act. Both of those have made some modifications to the Act 158 pathways, and we want to make sure that we clarify those updates for you today. With me to help in this web training are some PDE team members who have led this work throughout the state in rolling out the graduation requirement. Amy Monroe is with us. Amy is a technology and policy specialist from the Division of Instructional Quality. Jean Deitzel is with us. Jean is manages the SAS website and the curriculum frameworks for the state of Pennsylvania. Laura Friederici is with us. Laura is our career education and work advisor for the state of Pennsylvania, and Rich Marichello, and Rich is a consultant in the Division of Assessment and Accountability. Also with us from Performance Third Learning, which is our contracted web team, is Andrea Brown, who is a senior systems manager for PLS, and who's going to help us give you some information about tracking and reporting that you'll need for the graduation requirement. The presentation is being recorded. Both the audio and the PowerPoint will be posted in the toolkit with all of the other professional development resources that I talked about, and we will show you how to access those so you will be able to share this with other folks on your team or use this in any of the trainings you want to roll out in your own school entity. Or even just go back, for a refresher when you need. For that reason, though, we do ask that you hold all questions until the end of the presentation. The participants are going to remain muted throughout, so you can enter questions into the chat. I do think, though, if we look at the presented content, hopefully we answer some of those questions for you and potentially provide you some thought starters along the way. So I do want you to, get some of the content and not rush to type. We will get to questions at the end of the presentation. If there is a question we don't address, or if you have a scenario that you think is pretty specific to your own school entity, we do have 2 open office hour question and answer sessions. Those sessions are not recorded. They are not presentations. They are opportunities for you to ask questions and receive technical assistance. Those can be accessed through the link on the same notice from which you access this presentation. And we will also give you those links again at the end of the presentation. So you have access to 2 open question and answer technical service dates if you would like those. Also, this presentation will be repeated in September for folks who did not have the opportunity to join us today. Again, we tried to straddle these around opening of school. We know that's going on as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jean to begin some of our updates, and the team will present all of us on and off as we go here.
Okay, thank you, Brian. As we move to the next slide, we've put together a quick agenda. We're going to take you out in a moment to the SAS site where our toolkit resides, and to show you a new piece that we've added just to keep things current and up to date. And also going to talk about pathways to graduation. And again, in that new and noteworthy, we've got a couple of graphics to show you as well. Brian's going to talk about the 2-score composite. Of course, you're all familiar with the 3-score composite, but the new adds, if you will, the 2-score composite and the extension of COVID-19 as an extenuating circumstance. Then we're going to do a little sort of walkthrough of our, internally we call it the game of life. It's really a graduation trail graphic. Looks rather complicated at first, but we'll walk you through it. And we have a student named Sam, and we're going to take you through Sam's journey and use that graduation trail to sort of take a walk through to see where Sam lands when day is done in terms of meeting graduation requirements. And a quick, perhaps if we have time, a quick look at our tracking tool. And then, as Brian suggested at the end, keep your good questions in mind, and we'll do a Q&A. Probably, we're thinking maybe 10 plus minutes or so. Brian suggested other options as well. And don't forget, there's always the RA account. You can always email your questions to those folks as well. So if we go to the next slide, Brian, I think I'm going to share my screen. And the next slide, so I'm going to take the screen away from you right now. And I'm going to take you to our SAS site. And I'm in the SAS portal. And under instruction, I selected Act 158 Pathways to Graduation Toolkit. And this is actually, to use a cliche, this is your one-stop shop for everything related to Pathways to Graduation. You don't need to scroll around in the PDE site and other places. Everything is here. We keep this as up to date as we possibly can. Note, if you will, we have a little ad here of the Keystone Composite, the 2-score composite, which we're going to talk about, and the pandemic as an extenuating circumstance. So this new and noteworthy, we created this just to keep you up to date on changes, enhancements, additions, and the like. And the reason we did this is we are going to be updating the toolkit. That takes a bit of a turnaround till we update the toolkit and run through ADA compliance. So this is a good go-to place for you. Notice that this new and noteworthy here is dated July 2022. We just posted this a couple of weeks ago. And the 2 items again that I just talked about are detailed somewhat in this new and noteworthy, ultimately to be embedded in the toolkit. The graphic that I want to show you, this is really an updated tool. This should look somewhat familiar. We enhanced it to some degree just to provide all of the options and opportunities for students. Notice, if you will, get a quick walkthrough on this, in the Keystone Proficiency Pathway, notice we've indicated it could be numeric or non-numeric scores. And for each of those keystones, proficiency pathway, proficient or advanced, numeric or non-numeric. The update that we did on the composite pathway is we're very clear to say that the composite pathway are numeric scores only. You cannot use a non-numeric score. And then over on this side, you're familiar with the 3-score composite with the 4452 or greater. And now, as Brian's going to talk about in a few moments, the 2-score composite, which is 2939 or greater. And we'll talk about the eligibility and actually how that works. And then we have these pathways: CTE concentrator, alternative assessment, and evidence-based. So they are 3 of the, what I call the 5 pathways. But then we've added on this graphic the notion of the waiver and students graduating via their IEP, okay? But then our one pager has now become a two pager. We've elected to put for those three pathways, CTE, alternative, and evidence-based, we've done a page 2 to give you more detail on each of those pathways. So this is an important graphic, a cool graphic. If you have pulled down previously the other graphic, I would encourage you to make sure that if you're pulling something down, always check that new and noteworthy to see what's there in terms of what might be new or enhanced. There's also then what we're calling this game of life, or this graduation trail, which we're going to walk you through Sam's journey and take a look on how that works. And this frequently asked questions, again, will be embedded in the toolkit. And the FAQ that you see here really relates to the two-score composite and the extension of the pandemic as an extenuating circumstance. So don't forget all the other things that are here as well, including, and I'm going to bird walk a little bit here, our training schedule is here. Obviously, you know that, and obviously you're here, and that's terrific. But also, we will post sooner than later. We'll post the PowerPoint from today, and then once we have that recording run through and ADA compliant and the like, that'll be posted here as well. So there's always a refer to if you want to need to learn more or hear a repeat of what's been said. So that is our SAS toolkit, Brian. If you want to pull up now our slide 4 on two-score composite, the screen is yours. So you see the two-score composite before you, Brian. Looks like you're muted.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Jean. Yep. We're set back up. So as we look at some of the changes or modifications that have been made with the recent legislation, the first of those is a two-score composite. So this is new as per Act 55 of 2022, which was the new school code amendment bill of 22 that just went through. This is not a separate pathway. This is a modification made to the composite pathway for a select group of students who were affected by the pandemic and some of the mitigation efforts throughout the pandemic. So to qualify for a two-score composite, first off, the student must have earned one non-numeric proficient pursuant to Act 136. So if you remember, in 2019, tests were waived by the federal government. The 2020 Relief Act, Act 136, said that any student who was enrolled in the trigger course in the year in which the test was waived and passed the local grade-based requirement was awarded a proficient for the sake of graduation only. Now, do remember that those proficients are for graduation. They're not rolled into your accountability, but those students were exempted from accountability anyway. So the student with one of those non-numeric proficients may pursue a two-score composite. It's important to know that that non-numeric proficient must be a result of that waiver of the test. For example, a student who transfers in and has a proficient from another state or something is not eligible for a two-score composite. In addition to that, also a student who has more than one waiver, if they had two or even potentially all three tests waived in 2019 or 20, those students are not eligible for the two-score composite. After you've determined the student had a waiver, the two numeric scores for which they did earn in the keystones associated with the areas that were not waived, okay, at least one of those two must be a proficient or advanced. So on one of the tests they did take, they must score proficient or advanced, and neither score may be below basic. And that same profile is carried over. Remember, that's true of the three-score composite as well. There must be at least one proficient score, and neither can be below basic of the two scores that remain after the waived test. Then the composite of those scores must be 2939 or higher. Okay. Remember that when a student is utilizing the 2-score composite, just like the 3-score composite, the student must also have successfully completed the locally established grade-based requirement for each content area in which the student earned the score basic. Okay, so they have to have passed the trigger course or the Keystone to demonstrate mastery. Whoops. A student who earned a non-numeric proficient score and then later participated in the assessment. So there's several reasons this might happen. The student may want to retest because they wanted to try to obtain a 3-score composite. They may just want to retest because they're looking to graduate under the proficiency pathway explicitly. It may be for some sort of local requirement that they wanted a numeric score. But if you had a student who retested, participated in an exam after the one which was waived, that student cannot use that numeric score to calculate the 2-score composite. Okay, so you can't get a waiver in algebra, have a basic biology and a basic ELA, retest in algebra and get your proficient and use that proficient number. You cannot do that. To qualify, you have to have a waiver. And even if you obtain a numeric score for that waiver later on, you cannot use that numeric in a 2-score composite. You can use it in a 3. So any student that retested on one of their waiver tests now has 3 scores and can use the retest score in the composite. Okay. It's also important to know that Act 136 granted that student a non-numeric proficient as long as they passed the trigger course or the grade-based requirement, local grade-based requirement. If the student would retest, okay, and achieve a score that is not proficient, a basic or below basic score, they may still use their non-numeric proficient in the proficiency pathway. We do not take that proficient away from them for use in the proficiency pathway. So go back to my student that waived the algebra test. They were basic in the other 2. Okay. They take their algebra test. They can try to get a 3-score composite with that. They don't get the 2-score composite because those scores were basic, but they still have a proficient. If they would retest in other ones and earn a proficient, they could go into the proficiency pathway. The 3 proficients you need for the proficiency pathway can be any combination of numeric or non-numeric waived scores for the proficiency pathway. The important thing to remember is you can retest. The retest did not necessarily hurt you, but you can't apply the retest to the 2-score composite. You have to apply it to the 3-score composite or pursue the proficiency pathway. The other thing to remember, I've heard folks ask me, you cannot arbitrarily assign a 1500 or any other numeric value to a non-numeric proficient. The student didn't take the test, you can't assume a numeric score. The law is very clear that is a non-numeric proficient. There is no real statistical basis to assume a 1500 or any other number. It feels very arbitrary. And also remember that while Pennsylvania has incorporated the Keystone in the graduation requirement, the purpose of the Keystone is federal accountability. And there is no provision in federal law to simply assign numbers to non-testers. One of the other updates, and again, it's not a new pathway, but it's a modification to an existing pathway, is action that happened in Act 136 and then by the State Board of Education regarding the Chief School Administrator's waiver. So the Chief School Administrator may waive the pathway requirements for graduation for a student in grade 12 experiencing one of the listed extenuating circumstances. And these list of circumstances exist in the school code. And this is actually not a new provision. This existed prior to Act 158. You could always do this, and the exceptions were the same. Any student who's granted the waiver must meet the local grade-based requirements for each Keystone content area, which they do not have a numeric or non-numeric proficient or advanced. So you've either got to have a proficient or advanced, or pass the trigger course, or the PBA, or the credit recovery. Okay. Then you can waive the other pathway requirements. Waivers should not be granted to more than 5% of a graduating class. If they are granted to more than 5% of a class in consecutive years, it can trigger potentially an audit or potentially an improvement plan. So just keep that in mind. The list of extenuating circumstances, as I mentioned, is written in the school code. They're here for you: serious illness, death in the student's immediate family, family emergency, frequent school transfers, or transfer from out of state in grade 12. Those are reasons for which you can waive, the chief school administrator may waive pathway requirements. Those exist, again, in the school code before the law and will exist going forward. Through action around Act 136, the Recovery Act 2020, the State Board of Education did approve COVID-19 as an extenuating circumstance for the class of 23, 24, and 25 only. The student themselves did not necessarily have to have been ill with COVID. It did not even have to be that a family member is. That's certainly one reason you may want to use this waiver. A student missed a significant amount of time, but there are other applications in COVID related. Potentially a student may have been registered to do a work-based learning experience, like an internship or an apprenticeship, and the business with which they were going to work closed down and instituted a no visitor policy in reaction to the pandemic. That would still be a COVID related exception. If that student suddenly could not graduate because their internship was canceled because of COVID, you certainly could waive the pathway for that student, the chief school administrator. Again, this is to be kept, around 5%, especially in consecutive years. We certainly expect the number of students to decrease over time. Probably many students were affected in 23, some in 24, and certainly less in 25 as they matriculate through. This in combination with the two-score composite is to alleviate some of the COVID related difficulties you might have in meeting pathway evidence. I would run through the pathways, including the two-score composite kind of first to get as many students qualified in a pathway as possible. Again, trying to keep this percentage of students lower. I'm going to now hand it back to Jean, I believe, who is going to again walk you through scenario and how some of the resources in the toolkit are going to be able to help you out.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So I'm back to the Pathway to Graduation toolkit. Hold on a second, I think I've lost my my sound already. And I showed you what was in new and noteworthy, including the little sort of newsletter and the frequently asked questions. And we looked at the Pathway to Graduation graphic. I'm going to take you to a new graphic we've created. Again, we internally call this the game of life. Just take a deep breath before you look at it, and don't get nervous when you see it and cross your eyes. But so this graduation trail, this journey graphic looks incredibly complicated, and it isn't really when you start to sort of work through it. So I'm going to move that back. Brian, can you put your slide deck back up again? Because we really need to take a look at that sample student scenario, if you don't mind.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we're kind of going to switch a little bit here, but I think it's important to know, if you look at the next slide, we're going to look at somebody named Sam. Okay. And you probably won't remember all of this, but let's kind of talk through it, and then we'll go back to my little my journey graphic. So here's what we know about Sam. Sam's graduating in 2023, June 2023, likely, has an IEP, not a CTE student. And this particular individual has actually completed 2 service learning projects, one in grade 8 and one in grade 11, not going to college, plans to work after graduation. So a little bit of a snapshot of this individual, where they are and where they might be going. Now, if we look to the other side of the screen, let's take a look at the Keystone exam scores. Looks like in 2020, Sam participated in Algebra 1 and received that non-numeric proficient that Brian was talking about a little bit ago. Biology and literature. Biology is below basic, and literature is a basic. Okay, so that's important to remember. And also perhaps important as well is in all 3 of these areas, Sam either successfully completed the course, or in the case of biology, the local grade-based requirement was met through a project-based assessment opportunity. All right, so now keep all of that in mind if you can. And I'm going to go back again, Brian, and share my screen. So I'm going to swish you away again. And now we're going to go back to our journey, our graduation trail. So let's talk through this. I'm going to ask my colleagues to help me as well, because you really need to be very thoughtful as you're doing this. And this is not a graphic that we suggest you do with every single kid in your graduating class, but for those that are perhaps uncertain or don't seem to be making progress, or you're just not quite sure of direction, this is a nice way to sort of think through all of these questions. You'll notice in dark blue, we have questions, and then you follow the trail. So let's talk through this. Did the student participate in all 3 Keystone exams? Remember, I explained to you the non-numeric proficient, the below basic in biology, and the basic in literature. So the answer is yes. So we're going to move down here. Did the student earn a scaled numeric score of 1500 or greater in all 3 Keystone exams? We know the answer to that is no, because we had a 1457 in biology and a 1483, I believe, in literature. So our answer is no. And then, does the student have a non-numeric score of proficient or advanced for each Keystone exam in which the student did not earn a scaled numeric score of 1500 or greater? And the answer to that is no. So we're going to follow this no. And then it says, did the student earn a scaled numeric score of 1500 or greater in at least one Keystone exam? The answer to that is no, because we had the non-numeric proficient, and then we had a 1457 and a 1483. So we're going to go down the little journey here, and the answer is no. So now, question 2, did the student meet locally established grade-based requirements, and so on and so forth? And the answer to that was yes, because remember, 2 of the courses, they met the locally established grade-based requirement through passing the course, and 1 was a project-based assessment. So the answer here would be yes. And then we go to the next question, 3, is the student a CTE concentrator? And the answer is no. So we're going to move down here. And it says, did the student fulfill one of the alternative assessment pathway criteria? And just as a bit of a reminder, and I have a little cheat sheet in front of me, the alternative assessment artifacts are basically having earned scores on ACT or ASVAB or WorkKeys or AP or IB, or a concurrent enrollment course related to the Keystone content area, a pre-apprenticeship, or acceptance into Institute of Higher Ed. And the answer to that then obviously is no. So there were no alternative assessment pathway criteria met. So we're going to run down here. And then it says, did the student fulfill 3 of the evidence-based pathway criteria? Now recall that we said that student had completed 2 service learning projects. And if you recall, with evidence-based, there is a section 1 and a section 2. And as part of evidence-based, one of the criteria must come from section 1. And again, Generally speaking, they are test scores, SAT, subject test, work keys, AP, again, IB, any concurrent enrollment course, an industry credential, or acceptance into an other than four-year Institute of Higher Ed. So the answer to that is, although the student completed 2 service learning projects, that would be the 2 pieces of evidence from section 2, the answer still here is no. They've completed, again, 2 of section 2, but nothing in section 1, which might give you pause at this point to think, is there something in section 1 that could move that student to complete the evidence-based pathway? So there's some thought process along the way. I'm probably going through this very quickly, but just want to give the gist of how this works. So the answer for this, did the student fulfill 3 of them? The answer is no. And then we get down to question 6, which says, did the student satisfactorily complete a special education program? Now, we do know that the student has an IEP. And if the answer to that is yes, because the student has an IEP, we could move over here and indicate the finish line, if you will, with the mortar board and the diploma, that the student would meet statewide graduation requirements. However, I offer sort of a caveat, if you will. We should not necessarily assume, because a student has an IEP, that that's the route we're going. I think as much as reasonably possible, and remember, we want to keep our percentages, of students meeting pathways, strong, if you will. You can either go this direction, or do you want to revisit what we've just gone through and indicate, maybe evidence-based would be a possibility. Possibly we could have this young person earn an industry credential, and then that would meet the requirement of the evidence-based pathway. So in that sample student scenario, which again, I probably went through far more quickly than I should have, it does give you an opportunity to sort of analytically think through a student. And again, we have, you just move from question to question to question, and it looks daunting when you first look at it. But if you really apply a particular student with a set of circumstances, we think it gives you a good snapshot of options and opportunities for students. So that's the graduation trail. And I see there are some questions in the chat, which I'm going to, I don't know if we want to pause now, Brian, or wait. I don't know. Looks like most of the questions actually have been answered. Oh, and I will go down to this one. It says, is the no outcome for question 7, which says, is the student experiencing extenuating circumstances or a 12th grade student unable to satisfy a pathway? And if the answer is no, then you go back up here, and you can start over, if you will, or see what needs to happen, because hopefully this isn't something that you do a month before graduation. This is something you're probably looking at now for those kiddos in 2023. And if the answer to question 7 obviously is yes, then we possibly would look at the waiver option. There's also a question here, is there a limit or 2 or % of how many IEP students can graduate through their IEP plan? That does not have a limit or a percentage, unlike the 5% that we're talking about in the other circumstance. And Brian, you just answered that as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for now. And Brian, we probably go back to your slide deck again. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, hopefully I'm back up on the handoff here. So one of the things that I think we understand, while we've been reviewing this and really gearing up to implement this now for several years, the act itself was passed in 2018, and there were 2 delays during the COVID years, is that I think it becomes a matter of accounting and sort of tracking the progress and really kind of building that system is probably the initial challenge as we institute this. So we do want to remind folks that there is a tool, there's a free online tracking tool available to all school entities in PA. I'm going to have Jean show you how to access that tool and walk through it. But again, it's on the SAS site in the toolkit. I know we sound a little broken record, but hopefully we're reinforcing that we really have tried to put everything in one spot for you. And that's really your first go-to. Just to let folks know, there are right now over 100 school entities enrolled in the tool and about 52,000 students already being tracked through the free tool. And of course, again, it is voluntary. You are free to, work through your own SIS or your own vendors. You are free to develop your own system. But we do want to let folks know that that tool is available. And we have had some success. Like I said, we're over 100 school entities now between districts, charters, and LEAs, and we've got, again, over 52,000 kids. Those of you that have used the tool, I also want you to know we've been taking feedback from folks and working through it ourselves, and we do have some upgrades and enhancements coming that we think is going to make things even more usable. We are working for a double blind for the security so that we can get names into the tool in addition to just student ID numbers. We are also working to get more information batch uploaded as opposed to right now it's simply numerical information and test scores. Some of the potentially yes, no answers and things like that, we're going to be able to hopefully do through some zeros and ones and things like that. To make it even faster for folks to fill out, more efficient for folks to use. So those things are happening. Those of you using the tool, it is not yet set up ready to compute the 2-score composite, but we're very, very close. That programming began right after the code was passed. So we can tell you that we're going to have that for you very, very soon. Those of you who have not got a good look at the tool yet, not only are you able to enter the data and in most cases batch upload your data, test scores, and different things like that, not only will the tool kind of store that information for you, it does have some, for lack of a better term, decision-making logic built in so that it can color code pathways and let you know when students are and aren't eligible for certain pathways based on the evidence you've loaded. So when you've got a principal or a school counselor or a mentor teacher or someone working with a group of kids, this can help you sift through the decision-making chart. That exact same chart is built into this electronically in the logic, and as it accepts the data, it gives you some yes, no answers as you go through it. So I'm going to turn the screen over. I think Jean and Andrea are going to work through anything you'd like to know else about the tracking tool. Whoop. There we go. Jean, if you're talking, we don't have audio at the moment.
I am so sorry. Okay. Saying too much too quickly and not looking. So anyway, let's start again here. We had been honing in on the new and noteworthy. I've now bumped down to the Pathways to Graduation tracking tool. And here are some things that how you access the tool and enter through my PDE suite. So I think whatever you need to know and however you need to get there, this will help you. There was a question in the chat was a little bit concerning or indicated that they were having some trouble with the tracking tool. So Andrea from PLS, you're on our webinar here today. What would you recommend for someone who's struggling with using the tracking tool?
I would recommend that they contact our help desk. They can call us at 877-973-3727 or email us at helpdesk@pdesas.org. and someone should be with them quite quickly. I
Okay,
can put that
maybe you can
information in the
drop that in
chat as well. Yep.
Chat. Okay, okay, thank you. So Brian, while we're sort of here, I'm still on here. There are some questions. I don't know if you want to address them now. We are at the kind of hitting, I think, the end of the road here. The interesting question, the School District of Philadelphia is on, can this tool handle a very, very large district such as Philadelphia? And maybe you want to respond to that, Andrea.
I think it will depend a little bit on the data tracking abilities in the district and what they have to upload, but certainly the tool is designed for any LEA in the district or in this Commonwealth.
All righty, thank you. Someone had asked, where can I find the alternative assessment pathway criteria and the evidence-based pathway criteria? Recollect, if you will, if you want the short version of that, we do have, and hopefully you can still see my screen, we do have what I call the quick and dirty version, which I showed you early on. This is page 2 of the Pathways to Graduation, all righty, with the CTE alternative and evidence here about 2/3 of the way down. And then the pathway criteria are detailed here on page 2. So I think that's one source for you, but please, please, please remember that we have this toolkit and it's an interactive toolkit, and you can click on there and you can very quickly search for what you need. So you get much more detail in the toolkit. The graphic is just sort of a quick snapshot of what you need to do. Brian, there's a question here. Is the 2-score composite just for the class of 2023, or does it apply to 2024 and 2025 as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually working on typing an answer, but I think that's one we should share with the group. So there is no specific time limit on the 2-score composite. The 2-score composite applies to any student who receives the Act 136 waiver. Now, logically, we know that, you know, the youngest student that was taking a Keystone in 2019 was in 6th grade. That means they're now in 8th. At some point, every student who received a waiver will matriculate out, probably about 5 years. I mean, potentially with retention or kids stay until 21, we could get to maybe 6. But at some point, it will no longer be an option because there will no longer be kids with a waiver. But the key to remember is, like, step 1 in that kind of 3-step process, the student to be eligible has to have a 136 exemption. It lasts as long as students have 136 exemptions. A religious exemption is not eligible for an Act 136 exemption. A religious exemption is a choice not to take the test, and that student has chose not to participate in specific pathways. The non-numeric proficient in Act 136 is very specific. It is to the year in which the tests were canceled. It's a student who was enrolled in a trigger course in 2019, could not take the test because it was canceled, and met the grade-based requirement.
So Brian, there's a question here somewhat related, indicating when you discussed the 2-score composite, you said that student scores from out of state can't be used. And she said, and so he or she said something else about waivers. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, certainly. So there are other ways in which a student can have a non-numeric proficient. The most common is a student who transfers from another state, and you deem that the out-of-state test is equivalent to the Keystone. So you could be proficient on a New York State Regent exam or a Maryland HSA, have already taken that test, transfer to PA school, and we give you credit for being proficient on that test. So they could meet the proficiency pathway by passing 3 regents or 2 regents and a Keystone or any combination thereof. Okay. But that exemption or any other exemption, much like we just talked about a religious one or anything else, does not qualify you for the 2-score composite. The 2-score composite is specific to students who were exempted because of the Act 136 waiver on the canceled test in 2019. So you could have a student with a non-numeric proficient If they transfer from, again, we use the New York Region or the Maryland HSA or any other test, they pass one or two of those and then transfer in, could certainly pass one or two Keystones and be eligible under the proficiency pathway. You could certainly use that past Region or HSA, as evidence in the evidence-based pathway. You can do all of those things just like a non-numeric Keystone, but it does not make them eligible for the two-score composite.
This is a question related to reporting for the graduation report. Are districts going to report the number or percentages of the graduation pathways or categories to the department?
Yes. Starting in December of 23 and each December thereafter, through the comprehensive planning portal, you do report numbers in aggregate. You do not report individual student names, but you will report the number of students who meet each pathway, the waiver, the number of students who graduated on IEP goals, and the number of students who did not graduate. You'll also be required to indicate what evidence as a whole were district used. It's not a super cumbersome report given what it could be. We know that tracking is a big deal. So it is simply numbers in aggregate. I think it actually does the math and does the percentages for you, but it does require numbers in aggregate.
And here's our best question of the day for me. Does the tracking tool include student names or just their PA Secure ID? That's a great question.
At the moment, just their PA Secure ID. We thought it was more important to get you the tool operational prior to the beginning of the school year. We were able to release this in May, I believe, April, early May. We are working on adding names, but there's obviously a level of requirement because it's an online tool for individual security, and we are working to meet that, but it takes some programming that we just didn't have in place yet. So I don't have a due date, although I would say it's sooner or later. You will be able to include the names, but you presently can't.
Okay, and there are two more questions that are a little bit unclear to me, but perhaps you can unwrap them. Are students who are waived from 158 requirements through Act 1 part of the 5% of students who can be waived under 158?
Act 1 is its own diploma. That student is graduating by meeting the Act 1 requirements. So you don't have to waive them from the pathway. The purpose of Act 1 is that they get to their senior and cannot meet a pathway or a local graduation requirement, or you're unable to tell if they can based on, now remember, it's a tight set of criteria, but for a student who is homeless or adjudicated, if that disruption has caused them to either miss the opportunity to meet a pathway or your local requirements, or it's disrupted their academic records in a way that you can't determine if they meet those requirements, they can apply for an Act 1 diploma. But that's its own, they're still getting a diploma and still graduating if they're accepted for Act 1. So that's not part of the chief school officer's waiver.
Thank you. We have a rather lengthy email from someone in a alternative public school. It's not an LEA. And of course, they have students who don't do well in traditional high school, and they bring them into this alternative school. And it says, we offer them the chance to get a regular diploma. Do our students need to take and pass the Keystone exams under this act? Can they utilize another pathway to graduate? And individual says we offer various things: career internships, job shadowing, so on and so forth.
Pathways. I don't like to use numbers, but we have the career and technical education pathway, the evidence-based pathway, and the alternative assessment pathway are completely independent of Keystone exam scores. They have to pass either the Keystone or the trigger course or a local grade-based requirement. So if you had a student who, as long as they pass Algebra 1 or your equivalent of Algebra 1, biology, and English Lit, they could pursue any of the three pathways to still graduate. 3 pathways are completely independent of the Keystone Square.
Okay,
Now,
Mark
it's
has a question.
a different
Go
issue.
ahead.
Whether they have to take the Keystone for 11th grade accountability, I don't know. I mean, that's a different issue, but not for graduation, no.
Alrighty, and Mark has a question here that says if a student needs to use the evidence-based pathway and the only Keystone exam they passed was through the waiver, does that count as attainment of proficient or advanced on any Keystone exam?
Yes, any student with an Act 136 waiver already has one piece
Yep.
of evidence.
Yep, okay.
And
And
any other non-numeric proficient, that is a case where the transfer or something like that.
would come into play. Okay.
Yeah.
And Ben suggests that an FAQ on Act 1 versus Act 158 would be super helpful. It's just a recommendation for us.
And that's great. Yep, that team works on my floor. They're not in my bureau, but they're on my floor, so that we can certainly take that forward and coordinate. And I don't disagree with you, Ben. I agree.
Okay. I think I've scanned through these somewhat thoroughly, Brian. I might have missed one or two, but I don't see anything at the bottom of the road here. If anybody wants to type in a message, we still have 5 minutes and we could respond to 1 or 2 more questions if necessary.
I
Okay,
think the one thing that I see as a theme that I do want to address for a second is the IEP goals. That is not part of the superintendent's waiver or chief school officer's waiver. It's something that exists presently. It's not a function of Act 158. That's a function of the school code, chapter 4 or chapter 16. So this is a student a student can graduate, which happens now by meeting the academic goals written into their IEP. It does not mean that every IEP student would not necessarily have to meet a pathway or shouldn't attempt a pathway. What you're really looking at in that case is there are perfectly legitimate IEP team decisions that in themselves, because they are the correct programming for a special education student, almost instantly disqualify students from pathways. One of the best examples is a student who in their IEP, it is written that they are not going to take a course progression that includes Algebra 1. You may have some life skills students or some students with more severe disabilities that have, functional math courses and some different courses like that, that are, out through life skills programs and some of the job embedded experiences and things. They're just not going to take a trigger course. The student who doesn't take a trigger course is instantly eliminated. They've got to strike against them. So that's a student that is going to have to graduate on academic. And it's an appropriate decision for some students. Remember that you can write a trigger course out of a course progression. You cannot write the PASA or the Keystone out in an IEP. But if they're not going to take the trigger course, they can't pass the trigger course or the equivalent to get into certain pathways. That might be a situation you want to look at. PASA students, by definition, are not going to be able to participate instantly in 2 of the 3 pathways, and they're going to struggle in the other 3. Just like the student who has a trigger course written out is going to struggle in 3 or is disqualified from 3 and going to struggle in 2. So those are students you automatically want to look at it. Those are what I mean by there are going to be academic choices made by the IEP team written into the IEP that the student is then going to want to look at their goals. You're doing that now. I would assume you've got students who are not graduating on credits and course progression like everyone else because they've got individualized programming that's approved by recommended by the IEP team. It's approved by the parent in the school. Stick with that. It's really not a new thing. I think a lot of people see it tied to Act 158 and are worried about revamping practices. They're practices that already exist.
there is a question here from Clint that says, can students use more than one non-numeric proficient score? So for example, if I have 2 non-numeric proficients and a Keystone that is advanced or proficient, it would seem to me that you've met the Keystone proficiency pathway because the Keystone proficiency pathway accepts numeric or non-numeric scores, correct?
That's correct. Any combination of the 3. A student who
Yeah.
passed 3 trigger courses in 2019 met the proficiency pathway.
Yeah.
By then. Yep.
Yeah.
So any combination of non-numeric and numeric scores work in pathway 1 in the proficiency path.
Yeah. William says, I understand that students are required to pass the Keystone Trigger course, and that isn't necessarily true in all cases, but nonetheless, before other pathways open up, are students required to take the Keystone exam first? For example, a student passes biology, but does not take the exam. Is that student able to use the alternate pathway or evidence-based pathway?
Yes, that student could use those pathways. That's why there are
Yeah.
specific pathways not taught in assessment school.
Yeah. And Ryan from Centennial asked another, I think, good question. They're all good, but he says, how would you view or define pre-NOCTI and or NOCTI scores of proficient or advanced toward the CTE pathway?
So in the CTE pathway, the student has to either achieve the certificate for the NOCTI, or there is a provision for kids who are either in a program that doesn't result in a NOCTI, or there are a number of kids that take the NOCTI after their graduation date because they've earned enough course credit to graduate. They're taking the NOCTI simply as the certification test. Okay, so for those students, you'll see the way that's written. It's the completion of the NOCTI and the certificate, or the completion of that profile that indicates a high likelihood of success in the program. So that would be the kid that either doesn't have a NOCTI or the NOCTI is after your graduation date. If they've completed the program, that's step 1. Then in the toolkit, it gives you a couple things to consider. You can consider their grades, their attendance, their shop performance in the shop, and so forth. And you can make that decision as a LEA that they've met the standard of high likelihood. And I think Jean's flipping maybe to that graphic for you.
I was, but I'm going back because it's already 12:01, and there are
Okay.
a couple of questions on 504s.
Yeah,
Is,
so 504s would not have a separate provision, neither would a GIEP, because they're not, they don't have the goals for graduation. Those are more related to SDI. So any SDIs that you have, that a student has as part of their 504 or GIEP, certainly would apply. So if your 504 has accommodations made during the direct instruction of the trigger course, or has SDIs, you could apply those SDIs to their taking of the test or different things like that. So I guess how they impact it is those things are applied to the student gathering the evidence, but they don't alter the pathway for a student. There's no 504 pathway. They would get any of the provisions made in the 504, but they use those in gathering the evidence they need for the pathway.
okay, I think we have responded to the large majority of questions, Brian, and it is just afternoon time.
That's
So,
fantastic.
but
So very quickly, for the folks that remained with us, I will put this slide up, and obviously the slides are available so folks will see it. I referenced this in the beginning. I do want to thank everyone who took the time today. I know we're near the beginning of the school year, so know how much we appreciate your doing to get ready and to help the kids throughout the Commonwealth. This appeared if you're here today, you got this notice. But there are 2 FAQ sessions. We call them open office hours. They are not recorded because they're open Q&A, but they are also not long structured presentations. So if you have a question and you'd like to come back in, if you digest on this, you have team members that have a question, or you've got a scenario that you think might be pretty specific to your school and you'd just like us to walk through it with you, those 2 sessions are available for you. This session will be repeated in its entirety as it was here on September 20th. And again, we will record the session and put it up as well, giving folks an opportunity if they were not able to log on today. Again, we tried to straddle what we thought might be the first day of school because we know that's spread over about 3 weeks for the state. So those are upcoming dates. The Zoom link and all of these dates are in the announcement you used to get here. So I'm going to assume you've got those. You can always get them off the slide once we post the slide, and you can always reach out to this RA, this account that begins with RA. That goes directly to the team that spoke with you today. That prevents you from going through a front desk and being rerouted and bounced around. You can always email a graduation requirement question right to the experts, and we'll turn that around and get the answer back to you. So those are some resources for you coming up. Again, apologize we're a little over, but this was a great discussion, super informative. And again, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your leadership, your dedication, and all you're doing to get kids steered onto these pathways. So thank you so much, and please join us in any of those future sessions if you think they'll be helpful.